Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today, I have the pleasure of Sally Orange, who's been on the show before, and she's come back. Good morning to you, Sally.
Good morning, Julian. Thanks for having me back.
No, thank you for coming back, having me asked you. I just want to tell the audience briefly again about you if they've not already heard your previous episode. You're an endurance runner, adventurer, and a mental health campaigner, and you've got multiple Guinness World Records. You've run over 50 marathons, completed 8 full Ironman triathlons, and you've got a 22 years exemplary service in the Royal Army Medical Corps as well as a physiotherapy officer. And that included an operational tour duty in Afghanistan. And so, welcome to the podcast. And we're going to be getting into the conversation about your challenge you did earlier in this year, which was you ran 7 marathons in 7 days on 7 continents, which is an immense physical, but also probably more importantly, a mental challenge. And I just want to just get sort of right into that conversation, really, of just what was the why behind doing such a significant event? People just doing 1 marathon is a big challenge in itself, but doing 7 in 7 days all around the world is quite immense. So what was the why behind that, Sally?
Yeah, I think for me, marathon running started almost on my mental health journey and helped me with my mental health. And I was someone who never ever thought that I could run a marathon. I used to run at school, but then I broke my leg and didn't run for another 16 years. And the London Marathon sort of came about, and I thought, I'd love to do that, but it just took a long time to pluck up the courage to do it. But when I finished that first one, I remember thinking, wow, that was amazing. I did it dressed as a superhero, and I probably felt like a superhero for the very first time in my life. And I carried on and started doing lots more, and I do them dressed as pieces of fruit to raise awareness of mental ill health. I've had my struggles in the past, and I found that by dressing as different things, people would come and ask me why, and it really subtly started that conversation. And people would say that they were maybe having a problem, or they knew someone who was struggling with their mental health, and it just really subtly opened up the conversation. And as time went on, I realized I was doing it on different continents. So I'd got to the point where I had done a marathon on every continent dressed as different pieces of fruit. And then I saw this challenge where you could do 7 marathons, 7 continents, 7 days. And to me, it was almost like the Everest of marathon running. And I thought, I want to do that. It took 4 years to get there. Obviously it's very costly. And I thought, I really want to take that mental health narrative around the world. There's a global problem with people not talking about their mental health, despite us all having it. And so, I just thought this is a good way of being able to take that message all around the world and give myself a pretty immense challenge in the same time as well.
Yeah, and I know you've got a huge purpose about mental health and been an advocate, and you're on various charities, and you talk about that a lot. And you take on these challenges to use to, I guess, create a platform for yourself. When you were taking on this challenge, what was your, I guess, leading up to it, your greatest fear before you took this challenge on? Because there must have been certain aspects of the unknown, really, uncertainty of all that.
Yeah, and you're right, and there were so many different fears along the way of so many different types. So initially, it was being able to get the funding to be able to go. It wasn't cheap, and I kept hitting no. There was barriers in my way the whole time, but it made me realise that sometimes you only need that one yes, and it creates the opportunity. If you've got that purpose and that drive, and you know why you're doing something, then it will allow you to keep chipping away, and sort of believe in yourself that you can do it. Then there is obviously the physical element of it. That was a massive fear. For me, one of the biggest fears was going to be sleep deprivation, because the challenge, some people have asked me, what hotels did you stay in? There wasn't time for hotels. You were literally did the marathon, got back onto the plane, flew to the next place, did the marathon, and you were changing from Antarctica, where it was -50 and it was blowing a gale, so they had to shorten the course to just a mile, so it was up and down a mile, straight onto Cape Town in South Africa, where it was +50. So there was big differences in temperature, but that didn't strike me too much as a fear because I'd done things in different extremes before. But it was the fear, I suppose, of once I'd got a main sponsor, of not wanting to let them down and to try and do everything that I could to make it possible, and for me to be in my best position to be able to do it, which as you know, didn't all go to plan. And I think the best laid plans never actually go to plan, which is how we got to meet, because I was diagnosed with a stress fracture a couple of months beforehand. So my physical training had to stop. And so that was a huge fear. How, if I'm not able to train for this physically, am I going to be able to get round this massive challenge? And so that's when, I contacted you and we started working together. And I realized, actually, even though it's a massive physical challenge, if you have the right mindset, then you can still get over obstacles, which is what I ended up going to do. I certainly wasn't the fastest, I wasn't the fittest, but I did complete it. And I was the first female veteran to ever complete it, and one of only 5 British women that have ever completed it. So yeah, was really proud on completing it.
And you should be proud, because it's a fantastic achievement to have done. Whether you were the first, second, doesn't really matter. You did something quite significant and you set out to do it. And so you should really be so proud of yourself. And interesting, I want to go back to that point when you kept getting no's, because people might not have a challenge as such as this, but they'll have certain challenges in whether in their personal life or in their business, and they keep persisting at something. They're getting all these no's. How did you keep going? What was it that kept you going and almost turned those no's into yeses, that got the funding and overcome all the sort of barriers before you even got to the actual start of the race? So I understand some of the, I guess, strategies that you employed that helped you keep going.
Yeah, it was almost celebrating them, the little successes. So many of the sponsors or people I contacted didn't even reply. So when I did get a reply, that was better than when I didn't get a reply. Even though it was a no, it was still more positive than a definite no. And then I'd have slight inroads, and I'd get smaller amounts of the sponsor. But I think it was really breaking it down, and it was some of the things that you taught me, Julian, which was the cookie jar of the small wins in life, and I used that very much on the challenge. So the cookie jar that you told me about was David Goggins, and it's using things that you have done in the past that you have achieved, so that when you're struggling at a time and thinking, I can't do this, you dip into that metaphorical cookie jar, because let's face it, we all like a cookie when things are, it's a bit of a comfort food when things aren't going so well. And I just had to think, well, you have got there before with previous projects. And I remember on one of our calls, you were getting me to say what the cookies were to put in that jar. And so for the challenges, it was, well, yes, I had completed the Marathon des Sables, and I had completed a marathon in Iceland, and I had skied across the Finnmark Plateau. And then I remember coming back to you saying, oh yeah, I forgot, actually, I ran the length of Iceland. It's amazing what you can forget. It just isn't on the tip of the tongue. But that for me was a really invaluable strategy that I used, not just on that occasion with the sponsorship, but also on the actual event as well. That whole breaking it down. And certainly in my 4th marathon, which was Madrid, apologies, it was Dubai, and it was along the boardwalk, and I was really, really struggling with my stomach. And there was, unfortunately, a bit of a bug went round and quite a few of us got it. And it was mile 6, and I just thought, I'm really struggling. I can't do this. Along the boardwalk were lots of lampposts, and those lampposts became my best friends. I would run to one lamppost, and then I would walk to another lamppost, and then I'd walk to a lamppost and run to the next one. And for 3 miles, I wasn't looking at finishing the marathon. I wasn't looking at the next 3 marathons that I had to do on 3 continents after that. I was looking at that lamppost. And I got through those 3 miles. And then another strategy that I had, which I call the power of distraction, was a friend came and joined me, and she ran with me for the last 6 miles of the marathon. She was in her flip-flops, so it shows that I wasn't going that quickly. But we chatted. I hadn't seen her for years, and we chatted and chatted, and it just took away the pain or the enormity of the event, and got to the finish line with a smile on my face. And I still distinctly remember those lampposts becoming my friends. And I think whatever you're doing, you can break it down. And I know with my mental health in the past, I've had to do the same. And that was getting out of bed or facing a day. And that was literally thinking, right, well, just have a shower. It doesn't matter if you don't wash your hair in the shower, you'll have had a shower. Because that was too immense for me to think I'm going to have to get out of bed, into the shower, wash my hair, dry my hair, and then get on with the day. And I thought, well, actually, if you can just get into the shower at this point, even though at the time I was still crying, it was better than not getting out of bed at all. So yeah, just celebrating those little successes, and just breaking things down and going, right, that sponsor said no, but there are thousands of others. Your values might align more to who and what they are. Can't say it's easy, but when you know why you're doing it, then you'll keep going with it.
Yeah, and there's a great lesson there in that way you broke it down, that 3 miles into those lampposts, and they became your friend. Because I think often we get caught up with the big dream, the big vision, the big objective, the big outcomes, and it can you weren't caught up with finishing the whole 7 marathons or even that marathon itself. And I think because if in essence we're not in control of that, we have no control of what's ahead of us. In essence, all we're in control of is the now, which is you went into the now. And I think often we forget that we need to get more in the now. And I know talking to ex-SAS sort of people, they talk about that 1 meter square. Just worry about your next 1 meter square, and that's the important thing. Is you worry about your next lamppost. That's the only bit you're in control of, and it's a real lesson of breaking things down and not getting too caught up on the end in sight. I remember doing my first marathon, just thinking, okay, it's just next step in front. That's all I can do. Next step. That's all I can do. I don't need to worry about the end at the moment. We have the end in mind at some point, but it's not what we're in control of. We're in control of the now. That's a really valuable lesson. And it's great that you were tough. You were facing a real tough challenge on your stomach, and you did that. During the actual challenge, so carry on.
Sorry, I think when you mentioned the control and the uncontrollables, we talked about that previously, about what things were my fears, and the sleep deprivation were my fears, and trying to visualize what that would look like if I couldn't sleep. What could I put into place myself to help with if I couldn't sleep? But we had a situation that came about that I had not thought about at all, but the learnings behind what you taught me of being able to control the controllables and not worry about the uncontrollables. So after Antarctica, we'd use one plane to get to Antarctica, and then it was going to be the same plane that took us all around the world after that. Slight problem in that plane was delayed in getting to Cape Town. So we got a text message saying, bit of a problem, our plane is delayed by, I think it was 12 hours at this point, which you could go, well, I did. I was like, wow, well, look at the positives of this. We get to have a bed tonight. What it does mean is our last 3 marathons on 3 continents had to be done within 36 hours. So I was like, well, listen to what Julian told me. There's nothing I can do about that. And you've got a bit of time now to rest. Although we had to be out of the hotel because we'd booked our hotels thinking that we were leaving, and I couldn't rebook that. And I thought, okay, you've got this time, go and have a facial and a massage, because you'll be lying down, you'll be resting, you'll be relaxing your mind, and just make the best of the situation. And yeah, that you came into my mind of thinking, well, we didn't think about this one, did we? This wasn't one that, but the learnings and the lessons that you taught me meant I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't suddenly magic a plane to get there, or the organisers were doing everything they could to get the plane, because obviously they've got a lot of clients who are on this event. So yeah, it was just a case of going, well, can't control that, but let's make the best of a bad situation. I was still resting, I was still lying down, and yeah, managed to get prepare myself for when the plane did arrive, and we'd still got those extra 5 marathons to do.
Yeah, and it's great that you sort of reframed that, and you took the moment to actually do a bit of rest and recuperation, and actually can't do anything about this, but I can do something about me resting. If I fret about it, get frustrated or angry, that's not resting, is it? And so actually it's sometimes, and I always say to people, a lot of my clients, it's easy to sometimes say these things, but actually when you're doing and you did it, and there's a bit of self-discipline in there, that you did the actual, okay, I can't control that, I can control this, I can rest, that's all I can do, nothing else I can do. And it just takes a little bit of willpower to do that sometimes. It's not that easy.
I think another time when I did again, the reframing of situations, there was another time when we were in Madrid, and because we'd been delayed, so that was the 5th marathon, we'd been delayed so much that we were supposed to be going around a Formula One racing track in Madrid, but that was no longer available because we were so much later. So we ended up having to do 33 laps of a housing estate in Madrid, which wasn't quite so scenic, and it was also very hilly. And again, my stomach really played up. And from mile 8, I can honestly say I cried from mile 8 to the end. And then I really had to reframe it. I remember in my training, I'd listened to quite a few podcasts, and one podcast in particular was a woman who was in a wheelchair, and she'd been asked, if you could have your old life back and you could walk, and what would you do? And she said that she would love to go for a walk with her mum. And I remember this, and I remember just thinking, here I am in Madrid on this incredible event. Yes, I'm walking, but how lucky am I to be able to walk? Yes, I'm walking and crying. Yes, I've got a painful stomach, I'm throwing up, and while I'm doing that, but some people would give anything to be able to do that. And so that was, again, the reframing came in, and I just thought, I got to the end, and tomorrow was another day. And I think we've all got that 100% track record of getting through a day, because we're there to see the next day in the morning.
Yeah, and it's that sort of gratitude as well, isn't it? You're sort of grateful for what you've got. And I think sometimes in the moments when things are tough, is to be grateful for what you do have, rather than thinking about what you don't have. And we know there's some physiological impacts on our mental health and our positivity through sort of neurotransmitters that gives us that positive feeling. So actually being grateful, and the practice of gratitude is so vital. And what I like about it, there's some real science behind it. It's not just a woo-woo thing, it's actually a reality. But yeah, being grateful. And I'm thinking you must have at times, and you of moments where, did you have any sort of self-doubt or thoughts, I'm going to give up, I just can't do this anymore, whether you're not feeling well or it's just too much? And just again, was there a moment of that, and then how did you deal with that?
I don't really remember, although I was struggling and I was in pain, I think because I wanted to get this message all the way around the world. I wanted every continent to have had a marathon done it where, I was either dressed as something different, and could shout about the fact that people in every continent struggle with their mental health. So the purpose and the drive was just so much behind it, that, as I said, I don't think it's amazing what you forget. I think that's the power of the mind as well. I'm sure there was, at the times, but I was really lucky that everybody else doing the event was really upbeat, and they seemed to have the same mindset that when the plane didn't arrive, I wasn't faced with 40 other people going, "Oh, it's ridiculous." We didn't have people moaning. Everybody just accepted it. So whether everybody had the same mindset and we were just all in it together, that really helped. But if I go back, the self-doubt was actually probably before the event, with that stress fracture in my foot. And so not necessarily on the event, because I'd trained my mind and physically as much as I could. But again, it was looking at what I could do. So with the stress fracture, I contacted my local hospital. They had an anti-gravity treadmill. So I psychologically could still feel that I was running. I was running on a treadmill, but I was only 70% of my body weight. So that was a big time when I did think, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. And that's where it's great having people like you to remind you and go, yeah, but remember when you did say, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. Because that's the brilliance of our brain, that it can forget those things when you have achieved something. And I think for me now, I've started to realize the lessons that can be learned if things don't always go to plan, and even if they weren't achieved. So we'd sort of talked about having, because I'd done around the world once, every continent, a marathon dressed as a piece of fruit, I decided that my first marathon in Antarctica was going to be as a pod of peas, because I was going to be frozen. And I thought, it's worked so well with the fruit, that why don't I do it dressed as vegetables? And I thought on this challenge, it would be too much to do all of them dressed as different vegetables, because this is an immense challenge, and I didn't want to be stupid and flippant and I can do this. So that almost served as a different purpose as well, that had I not have completed all 7, it would have been the start of another journey, because Antarctica is the hardest to get to. I'd completed the Antarctica marathon, so that was the start of another project, which I can do in slower time. And that was sort of a bit of a safety net for me, so that I didn't go into a real deep depression after and feeling a failure, because it was the start of another project at the same time. And that for me was really helpful, as almost like as I say, a safety net, a fallback. So there were concerns, else I wouldn't have put those in place. But the power of the mind that forgets the things that were quite so tough, when you've actually completed something. People say, I don't have children, but people say it's the same with childbirth, that the pain that there is with the birth, that gets forgotten when the baby arrives, and people go on to go and do it again. So I think that's a really powerful analogy to me.
And you talked about some of the challenges, obviously, along the way, and some of the internal stuff. Did you face, whether that's prior to the event or during the event, I guess, negativity from others? Because obviously sometimes other people can't always see what we're doing or why we're doing it. And it'd be interesting to see, was there any negativity from those around you? But also, how did you deal with that? Because I think often we get into big visions for our lives, and people look at you and go, "Oh, you can't do that. Oh, that's not good. Why are you doing that?" And it's dealing with that, because that's a reality. And I was wondering if you had that challenge, and how did you deal with that challenge?
Yeah, whenever I told people what I was going to do, they'd say that's not possible, and I'd say, well, they said just the flights alone, that would take up 7 days to get there, and that will tire you out without doing the 7 marathons. I knew it had been done before, so it was something that could be done. And I had researched this. I hadn't gone into it blind of just going to do this. I knew there was a company that flew you around all these different places, and yeah, it was going to be a challenge, and that's why I was doing it. The jet lag alone was difficult, but I think it was something that at the time when you were doing it, I think it's like anything that's a big challenge when you're in it. I just kept going with it. Just had to keep going. It was after it was difficult after, and it did take a bit of time mentally and physically to recover from it, because I think it was 16 different time zones that we flew through at the times, and sometimes it was 2 o'clock in the morning when you were running, or it might be 8 o'clock at night when you start. You just had to put that behind you. But yeah, the negativity of others, and I think probably the negativity with the sponsors, that they weren't interested either because it couldn't be done, or so that in itself was a negativity. No, we don't want to be involved. I don't know what their remit was for, it might be budget, it might be the lack of belief in the project, but instantly any layperson that I told I was going to do it, I say any layperson, any other marathon runner would also be saying, well, that can't be done. But I think when you mix with the right people and you talk to the right people and do your research, you find your own belief. And I knew it could be done because it had been done before. So I'd always got that inner belief. It was whether I could do it as well as those other people who'd done it before. And I do believe there's lots of people in this world who are very good at saying, I would love to do that, or it's all right for you to go and do that. There was massive sacrifices that I had to make to be able to go and do it. And I would just never belittle anyone's aspirations on what they want to do, just because I don't necessarily want to do what they want to do. I think it's great that people have a vision of what they'd like to go and achieve, and it's what keeps us driving forward and motivates us to do more. So yeah, it was lots of naysayers, but it was my own inner belief that I had to believe in. And surround myself with those people who would encourage it and help me get to the end.
Because it is tough when you've got the naysayers around you, and often people say, well, just don't associate with those naysayers. But sometimes those naysayers are very close to us. So it's not so easy. And it's trying to turn that negativity into a challenge, isn't it? Turn it into something, well, not just I'll prove you, but actually take that negativity as an energy source. And okay, I'll use that as a way of keeping me going, as a way of positive. I'll turn it, I'll flip the script on it, and go, okay, I can see why you don't see what I see, which is fine, and because perhaps I've not explained it well enough, or you don't have that confidence, but that's okay, but I'll show you by demonstrating, not in an arrogant way, not in a think that sort of way, but it is tough. And I think sometimes it's those around us, and then it's getting around people who, believe in you. And I know when I work with you, as much as I think it's a huge challenge, I want to talk to people about you in that sense. People always, they hear the 7 marathons, 7 days, and they go 7, and they go, what? And it's a real showstopper in a conversation. And which is great, and that's okay, that's fine. People initially think, wow, it's amazing, and even when I was working with you, there's always that, and I said to you when I was working with you, you're not in control, I'm not in control of you completing this. All we can do is work on in the now stuff and give you strategies to help you overcome those moments. And I remember hearing that the plane had delayed and it all knocked everything out of kilter. I think, oh my goodness, that's just you can do nothing about it. And I thought that's just going to scupper everything. But fortunately, they got there, and you got there as well, which was fantastic.
I'd got your little voice. I'd got your little voice in that. I think that's why I thought, well, I'll go and get a facial and what can you do? But I think it's the bigger part of it that now I have achieved it, and people that didn't think it was possible have seen that it is possible, that they can hopefully be inspired by that. And if they then think they could never run a marathon, and it doesn't have to be a marathon, marathon's my thing. Whatever it is, that's the great thing about it, is that you can break it down and make it relatable to a marathon. Life is a marathon, and that's why we have the knowledge of, life is a marathon, not a sprint. But I think I always have in the background my mental illness, and when I was so unwell with my depression, and nothing ever seems as bad as that. So if I didn't achieve it, yes, it would have been disappointing, and a lot of expense would have gone into it, but I would still be here to live for the next day. And with my depression, I got to the point where I'd written a suicide note. I was, in taken to hospital under the care of the psychiatrist, and I wasn't thinking that I would get through another day. So it's perspective as well. And whilst it meant so much for me, it meant so much because I didn't want other people to get to that point in their life where they want to take their life. And I think all too often with these things is that you don't get help until you get to the crisis points. I love the saying that you wouldn't learn to swim in a storm. So why do we allow it that you get to the worst point possible with your mental health before you then get help? And you can't take on that, I couldn't take in the information that I was being told. So if, you're prepared for these things, then it makes it so much easier than if you're in that time when everything is, which is what this whole challenge was about, was the preparation for it. And I'm not known for my preparation for challenges, because I'm just like, well, I'll just give it a go. But this was something big, and it was something that involved other people. And I think for me, that was something that it wasn't just me. It was, I told people about it, and that, I don't know if you remember, was a massive challenge for me. And we talked about for a long time that I had to tell people I was doing it, because I just wanted to keep it quiet, but then it wouldn't have the impact of doing it. And I've kept a lot of my challenges in the past quiet, and then maybe told people after I've done them, whether I've been successful or not. But I just haven't want people to think, oh, look at me. But now I would like people to know that they can do more than they think they can, because if I can do it, then anybody else can as well.
Yeah, and that's a great lesson, because often we hear lots of people do great, amazing things and tell of the events afterwards when they've succeeded. But actually, sometimes it takes courage to. And I remember we had that conversation. I sort of challenged you about putting it out there now, because there's an unknown to it. Because it gets your attention, but also, well, now I've got to do it. But also, well, if I don't do it, everybody knows I've not done it, and there's a bit of the ego in there in terms of that. But I think it's healthy, because then sometimes things don't work out, and that's okay. And it's good to see, and I think good to have role models that things don't work out, and therefore actually it's okay to fail, or I don't see fail more as feedback, or you try something, it didn't quite work out the first time, you tried again, and etc. So it took you 4 years to get to this event anyway. I just want to go back to the mental health piece, where with your own sort of experience, and people might be listening to right now, maybe may not be in a place where it's not great for them, or they maybe know of others who are not in a great place. And you said about not learning to swim in a storm, which is I think a great analogy. But how do we, I guess, have that conversation? What's the best way of going about it from your experience, personal experience of being on the other end, but also your interaction with those people along the way in your journey as well?
I think it can be really difficult at the moment. There's very much about, you just need to talk. Often you don't want to talk. what's really important is actually needing to listen as well. So on both parts, listening and talking are really important. So I was closed off to listening, that people are saying you're not yourself, we think that you need to get help. It was this blinker, I don't want to acknowledge that. But also, if somebody does want to talk, for the person who's struggling, if they do find themselves talking, often the other person is worried, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I mention the word suicide? If they then go and do it, I've put that idea in their head. That is not the case at all. And just being there to listen and to offload, and then potentially to signpost. You can't help people unless they tell you what's wrong. And that was something that I found on the day in Madrid, when it was the really tough marathon. I found a really interesting experiment, and I had a lot of time to think on that one because it took me a long time. But I was crying as I was going round, and all the other runners, because you saw each other all the time, because it was 33 laps, they would go past, and some would say, "You okay?" And I'd be like, "No." And they would carry on anyway. And then some would say, "You doing okay? You all right?" And I'd say, "No, not really." And they would stop and say, "Is there anything I can do to help?" And I'd say, I don't know what to do with my stomach. And they would offer suggestions and then go on their way. And there was some that would stop and say, and then walk with me for quite a few. And it was me that then saying, "Look, you please go on, because I don't want this to impact you." But I now, from my mental health struggles, know actually so many people like to help other people. So if you tell someone that you're struggling, you're offering the opportunity for them to feel good about themselves, because they're helping you. And what I had to learn, or what I did remember to think with the Madrid Marathon, was that all of them were doing marathons themselves. So they were all struggling as well. So they've got their own things going on in life. And some people, it's just in their makeup to carry on. And others are there to stop and help others and get you across the line without a detriment, whatever detriment it is to themselves. And I just found it fascinating. But if I didn't tell people I was struggling, how could they even help me? If I'd just gone, if they'd have gone past it, "How are you doing?" "Yeah, fine." Well, I've told them I'm fine, so why would they think there is anything? And I think that's where we have the passive aggressive in relationships, where "You're okay?" "Yeah, fine," when actually clearly you're not. But so the key points there, I would say that listening is just as important to talking. And sometimes for me, I didn't want to be in the room with anyone, but I didn't want to be on my own either. And that was a really difficult situation, because how do people know what to do when you don't want to be on your own, but you don't want to be with people? So that's where actually just being in the room with other people, or in the house with other people, had played a really big part. And things like maybe just doing a jigsaw. You didn't have to talk, but you're doing something together. And that was something that I realized later. This would have been good, because I could have been in the same room with someone. I wasn't on my own. It wasn't too taxing. Other times I'd just have, when the TV was too much for me, people might say, "Just look at the colours on the TV. You don't try and get the ins and out of the storyline of the programme. Just look at when you see anything red, just notice it to yourself." So just different strategies depending on how well or unwell that you are. But the key is listening as much as talking. And you won't say the wrong thing if your intentions are well-meaning.
That's really helpful advice, actually. I think sometimes just being with somebody is just as impactful as saying something, trying to fix them, sort it out, come up with ideas, solutions. So I think some people feel they need to be able to help, and we all have this innateness to help people, but actually you might not be able to help them, but actually just by grabbing their arm, hugging them, whatever it may be, or just say doing a jigsaw, that can be really quite powerful in itself. And not feeling you have to do anything. We're human beings, so let's be a bit more being with each other and interact that way as well.
Exactly, yeah.
As you reflect back, I know this was back in February, this, I think, event, wasn't it? When you look back and think about the events, and you've just been explaining some of the ways you've overcome the challenges, what are the sort of key lessons about yourself have you learnt from this event and challenge?
That you are capable of, to believe in yourself, I think is the main one, and also to be yourself. So for me, Antarctica as a pod of peas and Miami as an orange, that is what I do now. And in fact, in Antarctica, everybody was, every part of you had to be covered because it was so cold. So your nose had to be covered, and then your goggles on top. So no one knew who anyone was. They all knew who I was because this great big pod of peas would come together, would come running along. And yeah, it was that at times I hated who I was. But now I've come to realize I can only be me. I can't be anyone else because they're all taken. And just believe in yourself in different ways, both physically and psychologically. I think that was probably one of the biggest lessons. I did do, I spoke to a couple of people after, and they really nicely came up with 7 key points of resilience that I had learned from the seven marathons. And that was to reframe the experience, to learn what makes you get through those tough times. That's where you put them back into your cookie jar. The power of distraction, celebrating your success, breaking challenges down into bite-sized pieces, sometimes needing to improvise, adapt, and overcome. And as I say, finally believing in yourself. And when that all came together, I thought that's a really nice little package of the things that I have learnt, done, used, and can hopefully pass on to others, whatever their situation, whether it be business, whether it be a relationship, whether it be personal, health. And that, yeah, I look back on them now and think that's really nice to sum it up. And I like the number 7. So with it being 7 marathons, 7 continents, 7 days, the 7 learnings that came from all of that.
And it's great that they're fantastic 7. I know you've written an article on that as well, which is fantastic. And I think we often in life, we go through very quickly, don't we? And actually taking time out to sit down and what did I learn, and have used the 7, because you did 7 days, 7 marathons and 7 continents, actually to take those lessons. And I think we need to sometimes stop, reflect, pause a bit, and just, what am I learning from what I've been through, whether that was a positive experience or even a challenging experience. What have I learned about myself, who I am, what I do? I think it's important to do that and just be individuals who learn. I think for me, resilience is not just about grit, determination, getting back up and bouncing back. For me, it's more about the learning piece. And that's what you did, and you adapted. And I know working with you was an absolute joy, because you're just like a sponge in terms of learning, and you put things into practice, and you did it on the event, and you succeeded. And Sally, you've done an amazing thing, and I think the world of you, all the challenges you do, and how you just do so much. And I don't know how on earth you get into the places where you get into, and the people you get next to. It just, I always say to my wife, it astounds me. It's like, how does Sally get there again? And I'm part of who you are as well. I'm glad to be part of what you've done and the friendship we've got now. If people want to connect with you and get in touch with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for your kind words. I just want to say to anyone listening to this, if you do have a struggle or have a big challenge, that Julian is the most amazing person to work with. This isn't mutual appreciation. It just is. It got me through the challenge, and there were times when I didn't think that I would. As I say, you forget those a little bit. But yes, on LinkedIn, I'm Sally Orange. On Instagram, I'm actually now Sally Orange MBE, because as of 4 weeks ago, I was incredibly honoured and proud to have received a letter, saying that I'm now a member of the British Empire, which is something that someone like me, who was at the point of suicide, didn't ever think would happen. And it's, you know, thanks to people like you, Julian, who help others with what you're doing. So yes, Sally Orange on most platforms, but rather than me having to have Sally Orange with a 0, I now thought I can be Sally Orange. I just had to put the MBE after to make it one that I've used. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your lessons. And again, well done on such an impressive challenge and all the challenges you do. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.